giant revamp of Azeroth is 100% coming. That is not up for debate. The only question we have right now is how large it is going to be, and recently we just got some big information that might shed light on all of that. We all know Quel'Thalas and Northrend are getting revamped, this is old news, but player housing has been announced almost certainly race specific, and remember, we got over 20 playable races, which means all of these zones will have to get updated as well. Draenei have already been confirmed to get a new city, goblins are now getting a new city, there are dialogues for Orgrimmar expanding soon, things are happening in Undercity and the Arathi highlands, and soon Azeroth will look completely different. I think the times of having like 2004 Elwynn Forest in a 230 game is going to be at an end, and big changes are coming. So let's cover everything we currently know about a giant revamp of Azeroth actually happening. So check this out, I got a call list of Thrall, Azeroth, and Elwynn, and whatever I need I can just ask them, like what is going on with the Void Invasion Midnight this summer, and Azeroth himself doesn't really want to say much about what Nyloda really is. All of this is of course possible with Polybuzz. It's super cool, you can create any character you want, set up a backstory, and you got your own companion. So use my link and my code movies in the redemption page to unlock premium features. Polybuzz is also available on Chrome, so check it out, it is super fun. So I've been talking about revamps happening for the past few years, and almost always it was based on data mine models and a surprising amount of new data mine models. All of that has been implemented since then, and we are getting even more new information. Right off the bat, we all know that a world revamp expansion isn't happening, like Midnight is not going to suddenly update every single zone on Azeroth akin to the Cataclysm, and we will essentially like get WoW 2 overnight. However, other than the World Soul Saga revamp that we know, there are actual big hints that more could be happening than we initially believed with the Saga announcement. Aside from completely new zones and new buildings, Blizzard has actually been constantly updating all these minor features in the minor patches. For example, we got new guard models, we got new skeletons, new ship models, we got new animations, and all these were just kinda slipped under the radar. None of these were like big announcements. However, recently we did get one big announcement, and that was player housing. You can definitely seen it, and despite the fact that they announced this as a midnight feature, the roadmap was later updated to show that they're literally going to add this in the pre-patch or the end of next year. Midnight should be announced somewhere around August, September, and we will already get player housing by potentially November, December, which is going to be crazy. However, other than the little cinematic preview we got, barely any information has been out on how it is going to play out and what it will look like, although we did get some information from the interviews that has slipped under the radar a bit. It certainly won't be like the garrisons, and Blizzard already confirmed they want to make this a lot more social as well as a big feature, which indicates that these houses could be spread out all over Azeroth, and I have actually been talking about this for years by now. You can check out my videos from a year back talking about how player housing is right around the corner. Now, the main argument I had for this is that Blizzard has been literally updating every single playable race patch by patch and settling them for years. Even the exiled races like the Draenei, for example, recently got a patch where we learned that they're planning on building a new city on Azeroth. Other exiled races like the Worgen have finally returned back to Gilneas at the end of Dragonflight, and all of this seems like a huge setup for the player housing features. Even goblins are now getting a home that have been exiled for years in 11.1. The only race we still don't know much about are the gnomes, and the gnomes have been retaking Omrigan since forever, so stay tuned for that, because I feel like in Midnight we might get a patch akin to Undermine where they finally address that. However, just think logically about the player housing from a logistical perspective. Since this feature comes in Midnight, you really think we're all just going to settle in the revamped Quel'Thalas, like the Tauren and the Undead are going to be living in the suburbs of Silvermoon? Now, as I said, they have been fixing the loose ends for every race. They have been preparing this feature for many years now. It's almost certain every house is going to be race specific, and we are going to be able to choose where we actually want to live. Think about how the playable races combined with the allied ones are over 20 in numbers, which means we're probably going to get over 20 zones, at least partially updated, which is going to go outside of the bounds of Northrend and the Quel'Thalas revamp and the remaining two expansions of the World Soul Saga. Now, before you say we might not have gotten much on the Void Elves or the Quel'Thalas or the Zandalari, we actually have, it just hasn't happened in the game yet. The past few years, if you've been following the lore, Blizzard has been releasing this book series called Exploring Azeroth, where they had covered so many of the other races and what they have been doing since their time in the spotlight. Just a few weeks back, we got one book on the various Isles of Azeroth. They entirely updated the Legion and the BFA zones, at least from a lore perspective. For example, we know that the Nightborn are living in Suramar, they have been rehabbing the Withered and expanding the city. We also learned more about the Quel'Thalas and the Zandalari. Other than the book, we have also been getting various questlines every now and then, as I said, for the Draenei and their variations, but also for the Earthren that are now an allied race that we are fixing as we speak, and even the Void Elves had recently gotten Telegrass Rift, which is their main hub, but we also know the Elves are going to be reuniting at Silver Moon and Midnight, which could be a good way for Blizzard to fix a few Elves with one swing. Let's also not forget that the Night Elves recently got a brand new World 3 and a giant new city as well. So, of course, the overall point is that the race-specific storylines have been prepared for years now for this giant player housing feature. We all know that Quel'Thalas is getting entirely revamped, Northrend will be completely revamped and likely enlarged as well. When we combine this with these housing zones, that is literally going to cover like half of Azeroth. Now, I'm not saying Mulgore, for example, is going to be completely updated, but a part of Mulgore might, and we might get some new settlements there that might not really be relevant to the current storyline of the expansion. Keep in mind, for their house, if it goes to race-specific route, they're going to build so many new building types and ornaments, from Tauren huts to gnomish technology, which is also going to be perfect with refitting some of the old zones, so it's not really going to be any additional work. I want to present a single example where Blizzard has actually sort of updated an entire, at least at the time, relatively irrelevant zone quite successfully, and this was without a doubt an experiment on what they want to do. We have seen in the Warfronts in BFA that Blizzard updated the Arathi highlands, where they entirely rebuilt Stromgarde, as well as the Horde settlements, despite the fact that it's still not fully available in the game. But it can be done, and of course later it can be tied to the story of why it is going to be done. What we do of course know for certain 100% is the entirety of Northrend is getting revamped, Undermined, well, not really revamped, but the goblins are getting a huge city, which picks up from the Cataclysm. Quel'Thalas is being rebuilt and enlarged, as well as they had confirmed in the interviews, but based on the other hints, I think all zones are going to get updated beyond this line of the northern eastern kingdoms. Recently, we got a huge storyline with the Forsaken getting a new identity, seeing themselves no longer as the Forsaken, but as a new Lordron, and very likely they no longer plan to keep living in the sewers of the ruins of the city, and they might build a new capital city that we could see in Midnight. Gilneas, right next door, was fixed. It's only a matter of updating it visually, and if Blizzard really wants to put in the effort on that. The Plaguelands have been mostly fixed from lore perspective, and the Arathi Highlands I just mentioned have recently gotten a huge update with the faction conflict just a few weeks back from the new audio drama, which is obviously all a setup for Midnight. So obviously Midnight is not going to be just about Silver Moon and Quel'Thalas. But this is not the end of information. As I said, we're constantly getting small hints of things happening. For example, I made a video on this topic as the Earthen joined the Horde. We had actually gotten some dialogue options on how the Earthen plan to expand the city of Orgrimmar and how they plan to build a proper harbor and not the tiny one we currently have, which is all relevant to the World Soul Saga as the main capital of the Horde. Obviously, it will need better logistics. This combined with the Orc Heritage questline strongly indicates that Orgrimmar is also going to get revamped, at least halfway or at least a little bit, and very likely Durotar as well, which could be where the Orc player housing is going to be. Similar storyline for Undercity and the upcoming Draenei city that we're going to get. It's definitely going to revamp the entire zone where this new city will be placed in, and this really goes the same logic for pretty much everything else, from Silvermoon to Gilneas to Gnomrigan, which will all be happening one by one. Furthermore, the entire blueprint and the new model of the remix thing that they're doing that we had for Mists of Pandaria and that we know will happen for Legion as well, could be yet another way for Blizzard to continue the revamp and get some of the older zones updated. However, the biggest and the most important thing though is the interviews we've been getting and how Blizzard plans to really invest now in World of Warcraft as a game and build far beyond the World Soul Saga. They're definitely planning to do a lot more, and some zones up to this day are just so painfully outdated. Can you imagine like the same Elven Forest from 2004 still being relevant in 2030? It is going to be like having two games in the same one, like playing a PlayStation 1 game and like a PlayStation 5 game. I think it will eventually have to happen. The only thing is though, and this is what I said at the start, it definitely won't happen overnight, it won't happen in one single expansion. One expansion could be a huge infusion of a large part of the continent updated, or like getting a whole Northrend in the last Titan, but imagine it like 11.1, we're going to get the entirety of Undermine. In 12.1, we might get the entirety of Gnomeregan, and Ironforge might be updated, and so on and so forth. The last Titan expedition to Northrend might be the driving force to expand the Stormwind and the Orgrimmar harbor even further, which could get both of the original capitals updated. So it will definitely be happening, there is no question about that. We will only have to wait and see how impactful it is going to be, but I'm definitely optimistic. Thanks for watching. Check out all the info from the book and how the Legion zones are today, and also check out my video on Peril and Select Mythology by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time!